Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and it's week 9 in the FCS, and we have a lot of great things to talk about this week, especially as teams slug it out in conference play. Here's what we have on tap for episode 26 of the FCS Kickoff. We will unveil a new segment here called the FCS Pro Pipeline, where we will take a look at former FCS players that are currently doing great things at the next level. We have a great slate of games that we'll get into in our game previews. And as always, we'll give you a few NFL draft prospects to keep an eye on this week in our 5th down draft outlook. But now it's time to jump into our 4-minute offense as we take a look at some of the top storylines heading into week 9. Teams that were struggling at the bottom of the MEAC like South Carolina State, Florida A&M, and Bethune-Cookman all have gotten off the mat, so to speak, and are playing some really good ball as of late. The Wildcats got their first victory of the season as they knocked off Norfolk State. South Carolina State and Florida A&M have posted back-to-back victories. Both have found some offense, which has led to those wins. And like we've said before, there's some great coaching going on in the MEAC, and it's evident by the recent turnarounds of these teams. Now, conference races are starting to heat up in the Week 9 portion of the FCS. You look at the Big Sky, CAA, Ivy League, SoCon, and Southland. There's a log jam at the top of these conferences, and we've reached a point of the season where teams need to start separating themselves from the pack in order to strengthen their at-large bids for the FCS playoffs, or just flat out win the conference and secure their auto bid. But this is what you like to see if you're an FCS fan: competitive conference races that look like it'll go down to the wire before you declare a winner. That sort of ties into my next point I'd like to talk about: FCS bowl games. Now, I'm not saying that this is a real possibility, but it's definitely something that I think the subdivision should look into. Think about it. We have a 24-team playoff field, and there'll be at least 10 more teams with winning records deserving of postseason play. So why not create 5 or 6 bowl games to reward those teams and their outstanding seasons? Have them run the week before the FCS title game when there's no FCS football being played. And I think that'll give the subdivision more content for television, and most importantly, keep the FCS relevant in the minds of TV viewers as a build-up to the title game, because there's a 2-week gap of inactivity with the FBS bowl game starting December 17th and running through January 9th. Now, the FCS gets lost in the shuffle once the semifinals are done to when the title game starts. And finally, the South Dakota State Jackrabbits have themselves a star, in quarterback Taryn Christian. What he has done this season is nothing short of spectacular. Christian has thrown for over 2,100 yards, 24 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions, with an impressive 9 yards per attempt. He's also played big in the biggest of games this year against TCU and an upset over North Dakota State. Now, Christian has the Jackrabbits sitting atop the Missouri Valley Football Conference and could be poised to make a deep run in the FCS playoffs. He is also making a strong case for the Walter Payton Award as well. All right, let's hand out some Player of the Week honors, starting with our Offensive Player of the Week. Northern Iowa's quarterback Eli Dunn made his first collegiate start last week and definitely made the most of that opportunity, throwing for 418 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 61-7 rout of Missouri State. Dunn also connected on 25 of 33 pass attempts and looked decisive throwing the ball down the field. Defensive Player of the Week honors goes to the entire Jacksonville State Gamecocks defense. You talk about a unit willing their team to victory. The Gamecocks picked off Eastern Kentucky quarterbacks 3 times, bringing all 3 back for touchdowns in a 24-7 victory. Needless to say, without those 3 pick sixes, the Gamecocks would have suffered a loss to the Colonels. Now, head coach John Gross had to have been extremely thankful that his defense showed up and played last week in Richmond, Kentucky. And finally, our Special Teams Player of the Week award goes to kicker Connor Mitchell of Murray State. The 6'2", 200-pound senior connected on all 6 of his field goal attempts, and the Racers definitely needed all 18 of those points as they pulled off the upset of Eastern Illinois 40-38. And we'll be back after this quick commercial break.
New York City is the largest market for broadcast media. It's the epicenter for the TV and radio industry. If you ever had a dream of working in the thrilling broadcast world, then make it a reality by going to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. CSB has helped numerous people get a job with hands-on training and a learn-by-doing mentality. You will learn all of the high-tech equipment in the TV and radio studios. From hosting your own radio show, to being a news or sports anchor, operating a camera in the TV studio, or editing audio and video, the choice is yours. Graduates from CSB have gone on to work at some of the major companies in the industry. To get more information, call 1-800-TV-RADIO or check us out at gocsb.com. Your road to success starts here at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
Getting you caught up on what's happening around the Big South Conference. As we look at the standings, I'm utterly surprised that the Monmouth Hawks are winless in the Big South, but like we've talked about before, it just shows you how tough this conference is from top to bottom. As we look at this week's schedule, the aforementioned Monmouth Hawks play their last home game in their current stadium against the Kennesaw State Owls. Now remember, the Hawks will break in a new stadium next season, and they wanted to get a jump start on the construction. So they've only played 3 home games this year, and they're playing 8 road contests. Coastal Carolina plays Presbyterian, and Liberty and Gardner-Webb meet up in Lynchburg, Virginia, and what should be another great contest in the Big South.
Welcome to the Big Sky. I'm Anthony Crescenzo. Let's get right into scores and rankings so we can talk about this week's matchups. Eastern Washington over Montana State 17-14. Northern Colorado beat Sacramento State 27-19. North Dakota takes Idaho State 28-21. Northern Arizona upset Montana 45-34. Weber State stays undefeated against Southern Utah 37-36, and Cal Poly handles UC Davis 21-16. The conference standings going towards the top: the Bobcats, Hornets, Aggies, Vikings, Bengals, Thunderbirds, Bears, Grizzlies, Lumberjacks, Mustangs, Wildcats, and a third three-way tie for first place: the Wildcats, Eagles, and the Fighting Hawks. However, if you look at the FCS coaches ranking poll, Eastern Washington is number 3 overall, followed by North Dakota sitting at number 12, Montana at number 16, and 17 is Cal Poly. And I'll give honorable mention to Weber State and Northern Arizona, who got 9 and 6 votes respectively. This week, we will see the 2 and 3 undefeated square off as the Fighting Hawks host the Wildcats. The Bears travel to Portland State. Thunderbirds go to Idaho State. Cal Poly hopes to keep their stock up at Sacramento State. And the game I'm sure you'll all be watching, number 16 Montana Grizzlies at number 3 Eastern Washington Eagles. This game will be a blackout at the Inferno with all fans in all black. Eastern Washington is on a 5-game winning streak and breaking records all along the way. They are leading the FCS in passing yards per game with 445 yards, second in scoring with 46 points per game, and total offense with 569 yards per game on average. The Grizz are third in scoring with nearly 45 points, fourth in passing with 348 yards, and fifth in total offense with 495. This is going to more likely than not be a high-scoring game, and the last time these two teams met, Gudbrand's debut, where the Grizz upset the Eagles 57-16 in Missoula. These are totally different teams now, and I will still stand with an upset, but it's going to be close. The highest point player in Big Sky is a field goal kicker, Tim Semenza, with 62 points and 91% accuracy rate. As much as I like Brady Gustafson, Jeremy Calhoun, Cooper Kupp, Antoine Cluster, and Gage Gubrud, Semenza's leg is the most powerful weapon in this game. And if I'm right, the conference will have a team standing alone at the top, probably North Dakota, but watch me be wrong on this like I am on everything else. For the Big Sky, I'm Anthony Crescenzo.
In our last segment, we talked about Murray State upsetting Eastern Illinois in one of plenty of surprises last weekend. Let's take a look at who should be on upset alert this week in the FCS. Wagner travels to Amherst to take on the UMass Minutemen. The Seahawks have found themselves on both ends of upset alert. Earlier in the season, they upset Sacred Heart, and a couple of weeks later, they took one on the chin against Columbia. Now, in this particular ball game, what they have going for them is a well-balanced offensive attack and a quarterback in Alex Thompson, who's doing a great job of avoiding the big mistake. Right now, the Minutemen can't get out of their own way defensively. They've been close in a lot of games this year, most recently last week versus South Carolina. They had their chance to win, but they came up short. Their run defense is atrocious right now, and to be quite honest, that's music to the ears of the Wagner Seahawks, who come into this ball game averaging 165 yards rushing a game at 5 yards a carry. That allows them to sustain drives, and I think they'll be able to do that this week and get the upset over UMass. Samford travels to Starkville, Mississippi to battle with the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. Now, Samford's offense is one of the most dynamic in the FCS, led by quarterback Devlin Hodges and wide receiver Terrell Hamilton. The Bulldogs average 40 points a game on offense, mainly with their passing attack. And if they're going to knock off Mississippi State, they'll need to have some balance this week. Now, Mississippi State, they have a lot of talent on defense, but offensively, they are struggling to sustain drives and are also struggling inside the red zone. I think they match up very well in the secondary against Samford, so the primary focus of this game will be in the trenches. This is where I think Samford will have some issues, and they have had issues there all season long. So look for Mississippi State to try and play keep away by shrinking this ball game with their rushing attack, keeping Samford's offense off the field en route to a victory.
With all the latest news on the Colonial Athletic Conference here on the FCS Kickoff Show, I'm Ryan Griffith. With Week 9 in college football upon us, we have some big conference matchups on tap for you this week. There are 4 top 25 ranked teams in the CAA. Tied for first with the 4-0 records in the conference, we have the 8th ranked James Madison Dukes, who are 6-1 overall, and the 22nd ranked Stony Brook Seawolves with a 5-2 overall record. In a not so distant second place, there's a logjam of teams with 1 loss. 3 of those teams are sitting at 4-1 in the conference. The 6th ranked Richmond Spiders, who are 7-1 overall, the 11th ranked Villanova Wildcats, who are 6-2 overall, and the New Hampshire Wildcats, who are 5-3 overall. The Maine Black Bears, with 1 less game in the conference, sit at 3-1, 4-3 overall. UAlbany, William & Mary, and Elon are all 1-3 in the conference. Rounding out the conference, the University of Delaware, Towson University, and the University of Rhode Island are all winless in the conference so far. This weekend, we have some big matchups coming your way. The noon matchups include the Elon Phoenix at the UAlbany Great Danes, who were bumped from the top 25 after their loss to Villanova last weekend. Both teams will be seeking their second win in the conference. The second matchup, which looks to be the top matchup in the conference this week, pits the 22nd ranked Stony Brook Seawolves against the University of New Hampshire Wildcats at home. Stony Brook, led by their 13th ranked defense and the FCS stars junior defensive back Tyrese Beverett Jr., who had 11 tackles, 4 for a loss, a sack, and recovered 1 of the 5 fumbles they forced last week against UDEL. He was named CAA Defensive Player of the Week. New Hampshire's defense is led by freshman defensive back Prince Smith Jr., who had a pick 6 last weekend against Towson. He leads the conference with 12 passes defensed and is tied for first with 3 interceptions. This will surely be a defensive struggle. The 3:30 games also post some pretty intriguing matchups. The Towson Tigers will be traveling to the University of Delaware Blue Hens in their second game under interim head coach Dennis Doughton Carter. One of these teams is going to come out with their first conference win. The Maine Black Bears are heading to William and Mary this weekend to take on the Tribe. The Black Bears looked more like ball hawks in last week's win against URI. They picked off redshirt freshman quarterback Jordan Fasano 5 times. One of those interceptions took place in the end zone and ended the game. 2 of Maine's touchdowns came from CAA Rookie of the Week freshman wide receiver Ernest Edwards Jr., who had 192 all-purpose yards to go along with those 2 scores. Maine will be looking to secure their 4th straight win in this matchup. Finally, we have the last-place Rhode Island Rams coming off a blowout loss to Maine, traveling to James Madison to take on the 8th-ranked and first-place Dukes, who were off last weekend. The Dukes, led by their star senior running back Khalid Abdullah, who leads the conference in rushing with 854 yards and 11 touchdowns, will look to continue to roll in this matchup and keep their spot at the top of the conference. Can URI pull off any Cinderella magic Saturday? We shall see. Both the 6th-ranked Richmond Spiders and the 11th-ranked Villanova Wildcats will be off this weekend. Hopefully the Spiders and redshirt freshman running back Deontez Thompson can stay hot during their bye after his performance from last week where he rushed for 116 yards and a touchdown in their blowout victory. Villanova's defense had 9 sacks against UAlbany last week in their win, which is the most by any FCS team in a single game this season. They will look to continue that defensive dominance after their bye.
What's up, FCS fans? I'm Ray Ryan with this week's Ivy League Report. The season's already more than halfway over for the Ancient Eight, so let's take a look at the current conference standings. 2 of last year's co-champs are off to great starts again, as Harvard and Penn are both 3-0 in league play. Sitting in 3rd place is Princeton at 2-1, followed by a 4-way tie for 4th with Cornell, Brown, Columbia, and Yale all holding 1-2 Ivy records. And finally, Dartmouth is 0-3 so far in league games. Thankfully, there's still a month of Ivy League football left to go, so let's move on to this week's action. We'll start with some Friday night lights as Yale travels to Columbia for a 7:30 kickoff on the NBC Sports Network. Although the Bulldogs have a bit more talent on offense, they are also minus 12 in turnovers, and the Lions' defense has only allowed 355 yards and 22 points per game. I like Columbia in a close one, and we could see another clutch kick from Oren Milstein, who's 9 of 10 on field goals so far. As we move on to Saturday, I see a lock, a good bet, and a toss-up. The game that I feel very confident about is Penn claiming victory in their 1 p.m. home game against Brown. Sure, the Bears had a good win over Cornell last week, but they needed 2 huge special teams plays to get it done. I see the Quakers' Alec Torgerson and Justin Watson adding to the 6 TDs that they've already connected on, and Trey Solomon posting his 5th straight 100-yard game on the ground. And the game that I feel pretty confident about is Harvard visiting Dartmouth for a 1:30 kickoff. The Crimson have playmakers on defense in DJ Bailey and Tanner Lee, and on offense, QB Joe Viviano has been extremely productive as a dual threat under center. However, Ivy sack leader Fuller and Reem Malati can absolutely wreck a game for the Big Green, and Dartmouth actually beat a Holy Cross team that handed Harvard its only loss. I still like the Crimson on the road, but I think this game could be closer than people think. And lastly, the matchup that I feel will be the best of the week is Princeton traveling to Cornell for a 12:30 tilt. Both teams' losses have come a stiff competition, and they each possess diverse offensive attacks. The Big Red features 5 players with 13 or more receptions and 200 yards, while the Tigers have 3 ball carriers who average over 40 or more rushing yards, including John Lovett, who's used under center and as a receiver. I think this one will be very tight, but I give Cornell's Dalton Banks the edge at QB, and I see him making a big throw down the stretch to lead the home team to a late victory. Well, that'll do it for this week's Ivy League Report. I'm Ray Ryan, and as always, hope you enjoy the games.
Welcome back to the FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Let's start previewing some games this week, and we'll start in the northeast region of the country where we have a Friday night Ivy League matchup in New York City as the Columbia Lions play host to the Yale Bulldogs. In this game, you have what looks to be two teams going in different directions. Yale has a ton of struggles defensively. They can't stop the run, and they're struggling to get to the quarterback. Offensively, they can't stay on the field and sustain drives. To be quite honest, neither can Columbia, but the Lions team is building in the right direction. They're a young squad that's still learning how to win defensively, and special teams wise, I think they're good. I think that'll be enough for them to knock off the Bulldogs in a close, low-scoring affair on Friday night. This is a huge game between Stony Brook and New Hampshire, not just from a conference standpoint, but from a big-picture FCS playoff standpoint. The Seawolves have two huge wins underneath their belt in North Dakota and Richmond, while the Wildcats have an ugly loss to Dartmouth on their record. As far as this game is concerned, the mission is simple for New Hampshire: stop running back Stacy Bedell and make quarterback Joe Carbone beat you throwing the football. It's easier said than done, but that's what has to be done if you're North Dakota. Now for Stony Brook, they've been very tough against the run all season long, but they have to be alert in the passing game and win those one-on-one battles on the perimeter. I like how New Hampshire is able to operate with balance. What I don't like is how at times they can't get out of their own way offensively. I like Stony Brook in this ball game. Their defense is that good, and I think they'll do a good job of getting key stops against New Hampshire on the offensive side, and they'll be able to take the air out of the football with their own offense and win the game. Here's another huge game on the Week 9 schedule between St. Francis and Sacred Heart. The Red Flash have two close non-conference losses to Towson and Montana. Both were very winnable games. They're coming into this matchup riding a 4-game winning streak, and they've done it with their ground game and defense. Marcus Bagley is one of the best backs in the FCS, and defensively, Lorenzo Jerome has put together already an All-American type season in the secondary. The hallmark of the Red Flash defense is their ability to stop the run. They can load up in that area because they trust what they have on the back end. That's where the focus will be for Sacred Heart in this matchup. Can quarterback RJ Noel and company do enough on the perimeter to keep them honest so that they can get back to what they really came in the game to do, which is run the football? We know Sacred Heart is physical on both sides of the line of scrimmage and do a great job of playing on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. Look for a defensive slugfest, one that I will give the edge to Sacred Heart now that linebacker James Rentz is back in the fold. The Pioneers defense is getting healthy at the right time, and I think they'll end up being the difference in this ball game. This will be a highly entertaining game and possibly a high-scoring one as Fordham meets up with Lehigh. You'll be treated to two outstanding running backs in this game in Fordham's Chase Edmonds and Lehigh's Don Bragalone, as well as two outstanding QBs in the Rams' Kevin Anderson and the Mountain Hawks' Brad Mace, or even Nick Shevnisky if he's healthy. The challenge for both teams is who can get off the field on third down defensively. Both have had their issues in that category as both struggle to stop the run. Now, I think Lehigh also struggles in getting pressure on the quarterback, and both teams are opportunistic defensively and creating turnovers, and that allows their high-powered offensive attacks to get back on the field. Now, the difference in this game, I believe, will be the ground game, and I give Fordham the slight edge in that department, as I think they have no problem leaning on Edmonds in this one. I think that's the approach they'll take, as they'll use their run game as a complementary asset to their defense and close out this ball game. The Kennesaw State Owls travel up to New Jersey to take on the Monmouth Hawks, and what a season the Owls are having. They haven't missed a beat playing without their senior quarterback Trey White, as both Chandler Burks and Daniel David have played really good ball in his absence. The defense has been very good as well, especially in the secondary with Dante Blackman and his team leading 6 interceptions. Monmouth is coming off back-to-back ugly losses to Presbyterian and last week to Liberty. The Hawks have to get things back on track offensively and can't afford another slow start out of the gate. I think defensively that rings true more than anything, especially in the run defense department. A normally stout defensive front seven has been getting big boyed up front all season long, and when you look at this type of offense that they'll face in Kennesaw State, if they can't win on first down defensively, it could be more of the same. And I like the Owls in this one. Look for Kennesaw State to do what they do best: control and dictate the tempo and pace of the game while playing high efficient offense. Big time matchup in the Pioneer League as San Diego travels east to Poughkeepsie, New York to battle the red hot Marist Red Foxes. This is a game of matchups, and the biggest one defensively for the Toreros will be between their All-American cornerback Devin Bryant and Marist wide receiver Justin Christian. That's the best versus best battle that Bryant has to win. Now, taking away the Red Foxes' best option in the passing game and forcing them to go to other targets consistently, in my opinion, is a winning formula. For Marist, it's about controlling the middle of the field. If they're able to make the Torero's tight end Ross Dwelly a non-factor, it can go a long way in ensuring that they win the game. The Red Foxes have been solid defensively, and San Diego's offense does pose a huge challenge in the sense that there are multiple and force you to defend every blade of grass. I just think overall, San Diego is a much better football team offensively and defensively, especially at each and every level, and they'll go on the road and win this game. In the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, we're starting to see some movement in the middle of the pack as we take a look at the standings. We mentioned in the opener how both South Carolina State and Florida A&M are getting off the mat, so to speak. Both teams have winning records in conference. Quietly, the Bulldogs are undefeated and have a really big matchup this week against the Hampton Pirates. Both Norfolk State and Delaware State are the only winless teams within the conference, and looking at this week's schedule, I think that Pirates-Bulldog matchup is a big one, obviously. If South Carolina State can get to 4-0 in conference and 4-3 overall, that'll just give them that much-needed confidence to make a run at the MEAC crown in hopes for a Celebration Bowl berth. Norfolk State and Morgan should be an interesting game, as should the Savannah State Tigers and Howard Bison game, which will be won by the team that could run the football the best.
For the Missouri Valley Football Conference, I'm Brian Sullivan. It was another exciting week in the conference as South Dakota State took sole possession of first place in the conference with their 24-10 victory over Youngstown State, as the Jackrabbits scored twice in the first 5 minutes and the defense didn't give up a touchdown until late in the fourth. North Dakota State kept their conference title hopes alive as their defense blocked 2 field goals and 3 fourth-quarter turnovers on their way to their 21-13 victory over Western Illinois. And finally, Northern Iowa, behind quarterback Eli Dunn, who threw for 418 yards and 2 TDs in his first start, dismantled the Missouri Bears' smothering defense 61-7. Now here are the standings as of Week 9. South Dakota is in first place at 4-0. North Dakota State, Youngstown State, and South Dakota are all 1 game back. And Western Illinois and Northern Iowa are 2-2, while Indiana State is at 2-3. Now let's take a look at Week 9 by heading to Illinois State, where the Redbirds host number 7 South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits look to continue their push to the conference title as they go for their 5th straight conference win behind the strong play of Stats National Offensive Player of the Year candidate Tyron Christian, who leads the MVFC and is 3rd in the FCS in passing efficiency at 172.9 rating with 24 touchdowns to go along with our dynamic receiving duo of NFL-ready wide receiver Jake Winicky, who has 12 TDs, and tight end Dallas Goedert, who leads all Division I tight ends in receiving yards with 819 yards and 51 catches. If Illinois State defense can't figure out a way to slow down the prolific offense of the Jackrabbits, this game could get out of hand very quickly. Next, let's head to Northern Iowa, where the Panthers may have found their quarterback of the future in sophomore Eli Dunn, who's coming off his 418-yard game and looks to continue his success in his second career start as the Panthers host number 4 NDSU. It was the first time Northern Iowa had a 400-yard quarterback since 2009. But Dunn needs to repeat his strong debut performance if the Panthers hope to win, but it won't be easy as he and the team will face a rough and tough Bison defense that caused 3 turnovers and had 2 sacks last week. On the flip side, the Panthers defense must find a way to stop Bison quarterback Easton Stick, who has 10 TDs, and running back King Frazier, who has 7 touchdowns and is averaging 5.1 yards per game. Heading to Youngstown, Ohio, where number 14 Penguin Nation look to rebound after losing out on first place as they host Indiana State. The smothering Penguins defense, led by NFL-ready defensive end Derek Rivers, has only given up 1 rushing touchdown this year and will look to continue their success against a very good Sycamore offense, which includes quarterback Isaac Harker, who has 18 touchdowns, and NFL-ready wide receiver Robert Tonyan Jr., who has 9 TDs. A win here for Youngstown State could potentially seal a playoff spot for Penguin Nation. Heading to Missouri State, where the Bears look to rebound off their 61-7 blowout loss and end their 3-game losing streak as they host Southern Illinois, loses a 4th straight. The Mighty Bears defense, led by Dylan Cole, who had 14 tackles last week, and defensive lineman Kobe Isbell, look to regain their reputation as one of the most feared defenses in the league, but will have to find a way to stop Salukis quarterback Josh Strowman, who continues to have a career year with his 2,102 yards and 13 touchdowns. And finally, in the game of the week, number 25 South Dakota, who is ranked in the top 25 for the first time since joining the MVFC, looks to make it 4 wins in a row and continue their playoff push as they host number 13 Western Illinois. The Coyotes will be without their star quarterback Chris Streveler this week, which means that there will be a rotation of Ryan Sager and Austin Simmons once again. Simmons wasn't bad last week as he threw for 205 yards and 2 TDs, while Sager threw for 42 yards. They will be helped by throwing to their number 1 receiver, Takari Carpenter, who has 256 yards and 4 TDs. If the Coyotes hope to win this game, their defense must find a way to stop Leatherneck's quarterback Sean McGuire, who has 10 TD passes, running back Steve McShane, who leads the MVFC in rushing yards per game, and explosive wide receiver Lance Lenore, who is 1 catch away from the league's all-time record.
This should be a big game in the MEAC, one that has a lot of intrigue in my opinion, as the Florida A&M Rattlers travel to Greensboro, North Carolina to take on Tariq Cohen and his North Carolina A&T Aggies. What a great turnaround this year by Rattler head coach Alex Wood. He has FAMU riding a 2-game winning streak, 3rd win in 4 games, and is getting great play from redshirt freshman quarterback Ryan Stanley, who hasn't had a turnover yet. Now, this type of efficient yet effective offensive approach is what's needed versus the best team in the conference. Their offense has to be able to maximize opportunities and put points up on the board. Defensively, it's all about stopping Tariq Cohen or at least slowing him down. The best way to do that is to be gap sound and disciplined in your gap responsibilities. Also, it takes 11 guys to the football to get the job done. For the Aggies in this ball game, what gets lost in all of the Tariq Cohen talk is how they've slowly gotten better in the passing game with quarterback Lamar Reynard. Now, defensively, it'll be up to Angelo Keys and company to not allow this young Rattler offense to gain any confidence. I think that's what will happen in this ball game. The Aggies are just too strong in every facet of the game to have a letdown. They'll take care of business at home. This is another big game in the Pioneer League between Stetson and Dayton. The Hatters have only lost 1 game in conference to Valparaiso and have played really good ball all season long, and they are only 1 game back in the Pioneer League race. Now, the biggest defensive key in this game is for them to make quarterback Alex Jeske one-dimensional. He's a dual-threat quarterback that causes a lot of problems for opposing defenses. Now, the Hatters have to be able to take at least one element of his game away. Now, offensively, they have to also avoid the costly turnover. This is what cost them the game versus Valpo. Dayton comes into this matchup with the ability to dictate offensively. Their offensive line has done an outstanding job all season long and is arguably the best in the Pioneer League. Facing an aggressive style defense in the Hatters, I would expect them to dial up the misdirection plays to help calm the pressure just a bit. That's your counters, your sprint draws, and your screen plays. Defensively, we've seen them not be able to consistently affect the pocket and stop the run. If they can get Stetson's quarterback Gavin DeFlippo to put the ball in the air at least 25 times, I think that's a win for them. Unfortunately, I think the Flyers still have issues in stopping the run. I like Stetson to go on the road and pick up a big-time victory. This game used to be the biggest on the Missouri Valley Football Conference schedule, but not this year, as the Panthers are struggling just a bit this season. For North Dakota State, they've won multiple ways this year: close games, blowouts, and also shootouts. That shows the mark of a well-coached team, that they are ready for anything come Saturday. In this particular matchup, it'll be important that Bison defense to remain active up front. Their front end has done a great job in helping out the back end. Defensive end Greg Menard leads the team with 5.5 sacks. And for Northern Iowa, they got great play last week from quarterback Eli Dunn in his first start. Can they bring that same level of balance into this week? Obviously, it's a step up in competition, but UNI has some pieces on offense to make things very interesting in this ball game. Defensively, Carter Schultz has been a constant disruptive force up front, and it'll be his play that'll determine whether or not the Bison can get their ground game going. Unfortunately, they'll need that type of effort from everyone on that defensive line on a consistent basis, and I don't think it'll happen this time. I like North Dakota State.
With all the latest in the Northeast Conference, presented by the FCS Kickoff Show, I'm Matt Chabatari. As we head into Week 9 in the NEC and the league's top teams start to take shape, it's hard not to turn your attention in the direction of the hottest team in the league in the St. Francis Red Flash. Coming off a big 14-10 home win over the defending NEC champion in the Duquesne Dukes, Coach Villarreal's team looks primed to step out of the shadows of the Dukes and win the NEC outright this year. At 3-0 in the NEC, they head on the road for the first time since Week 6 when they blew a late fourth quarter lead to the 23rd ranked Albany after a 4-game home winning streak. At 5-3 on the season, the Red Flash traveled to Fairfield, Connecticut to take on Coach Nofri's Sacred Heart Pioneers. The Pioneers themselves are coming off their first conference win this year at home over Robert Morris 16-10 and are riding high with a 6-1 record overall. With St. Francis looking to pull away at the top of the conference, both teams have shared similar paths to success in 2016. On the backs of senior quarterbacks in R.J. Newell for Sacred Heart and Zach Dreyer for St. Francis, and strong defenses keeping them in every game as they lead the NEC 1-2 respectively in scoring defense. What has propelled the quick turnaround for St. Francis has been their positive turnover margin at +10 on the season and their ball hawk nature with 20 forced turnovers on defense with pressure coming off the edge from defensive end Wesley Nagasu and linebacker Solomon Liano and the all-FCS safety in Lorenzo Jerome leading the conference in pass breakups. Across the field, Sacred Heart, who started the year undefeated at 4-0 on the backs of strong defensive players and forced turnovers, have changed somewhat in their Week 5 loss at Wagner when they lost the turnover battle. As they host St. Francis in this big NEC conference matchup, Coach Nofri will look to his senior leaders on defense and linebackers Kevin Berry and James Renz to change the tide in this one. Look for St. Francis to force a late turnover on R.J. Newell and win this one 24-23 in a close one to secure a stronghold on the top of the division as we head into November football. Bryant at 2-1 in the conference and 3-4 overall traveled to Duquesne at 1-1 in the conference and 4-3 overall, as the defending champions know they have very little margin for error as they head into the heart of their NEC schedule as they look to win at home in this one. It's time to fire up the upset alert as Wagner head up to UMass Amherst, an FBS school, to take on the Minutemen for the second trip to Massachusetts on the season. Early in the year, on a trip to Boston, they took on Boston College as they took an early lead on BC 7-0 before it turned out to be a 42-7 loss. But the tide seems to be changing for the Wagner Seahawks. Led by junior quarterback Alex Thompson and a running back tandem in senior Matthias McKinnon and junior Denzel Knight, they look to impress some people on the road against a team that has struggled this year in UMass. At 1-7 on the season in UMass, with only a win at lowly FIU, UMass is at the bottom of the FBS and is a team that Wagner looks to jump on early and win against. For Wagner to stay in this game, they need over 100 yards in the ground from their talented stable of running backs and win the turnover margin to control the clock in this one. One player to spotlight in this matchup has to be senior defensive back Tim Hayes, who has 5 pass breakups and 3 INTs on the year as he looks to turn over the Minutemen's quarterback in this one. Prediction time is I have Wagner winning this one 31-20 over UMass as they look to put themselves and the conference on the map in this one. That's all from here with all the latest in the NEC presented by the FCS Kickoff. I'm Matt Chabatari.
As we mentioned in the open, we're unveiling a new segment here on the FCS Kickoff. We're constantly talking about the talent that's here in the FCS, and it's always good to see how well this talent translates to the next level. Well, in our debut edition of the FCS Pro Pipeline, we travel north of the border to Winnipeg, where we'll find a former Illinois State Redbird quarterback that has put together a remarkable career in the Canadian Football League. Kevin Glenn was an outstanding quarterback for the Illinois State Redbirds, where he set 25 school records during his 4 years there. He completed nearly 58% of his passes for 8,032 yards and 61 touchdowns, and also rushed for 490 yards and 8 scores during his college career. He once tossed 101 straight passes without an interception, and in 1998, he led the Old Gateway Football Conference in passing yards per game, passer efficiency, and total offense, en route to leading the Redbirds to their first ever playoff appearance in 1998. He then went on to become one of the best quarterbacks in Canadian Football League history, playing for virtually every CFL squad: Saskatchewan, Toronto, Winnipeg 2 times, Hamilton, Calgary, Ottawa, BC, and Montreal. And so far in his CFL career, he has thrown for over 48,000 yards, 268 touchdowns to only 193 interceptions, completing 62% of his passes. I would say that's getting the job done at the professional level. The Ohio Valley Conference, in my opinion, boasts two of the stronger teams in the FCS as we take a look at the standings. Those two teams are the Jacksonville State Gamecocks and Tennessee State Tigers. Now, the Tigers are coming off a tough loss last week to Vanderbilt in a game where they had plenty of opportunities to win. Eastern Illinois dropped their second game in conference after losing to Murray State in a thriller, and Austin Peay remains the only winless team in conference and is still winless on the season as a whole. Now, this week in the OVC, UT Martin, Eastern Kentucky is a pivotal one for both teams, as Eastern is trying to steady and right the ship while UT Martin is trying to rack up enough quality wins to be in the hunt for an at-large bid in the playoffs. Tennessee State and Murray State feature two of the best quarterbacks in the OVC, and the Tigers, Ronald Butler, who played inspired ball last week. I was very impressed. And KD Humphreys of Murray State, who is one of the more efficient QBs in the FCS.
Welcome to the FCS Kickoff on Football Gameplan. For the Patriot League, I'm Chris Fichtel. First, let's get into last weekend's scores on the gridiron. Lehigh beat Holy Cross on the road 46-14. Bucknell defeated Lafayette 42-17 at home. Fordham squeaked out a win over Georgetown 17-14 at home to stay in title contention. This weekend there are 3 conference matchups and 1 matchup against the top 10 team. Bucknell takes on number 9 Charleston Southern at 11:45 on the road. Bucknell junior defensive lineman Abdullah Anderson was named Bison Athlete of the Week for the first time in his career, while freshman running back Chad Freshnock earned Patriot League Rookie of the Week honors for the second time this season. They will need all the help they can get if they're going to beat one of the best teams in the country. Freshnock is my player to watch this week. If he has a big week, the Bison can pull the upset. Lafayette plays host to slumping Georgetown at 12:30 p.m. Lafayette leads the all-time series 12-7. Georgetown played one of their best defensive games of the year last week, and they will need to duplicate that this week against a Lafayette team that will be fighting for their first Patriot League win of the season. My player to watch this week is junior wide receiver Matt Mrazek, who only needs 4 more receptions to be 8th all-time in Leopards history. In the matchup of the week, the Fordham Rams head to the Lehigh Mountain Hawks in what could be the title decider. Lehigh has won 6 in a row, and they scored 46 straight points last week, so Fordham needs to be on their A game in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Fordham has won every meeting between the two since 2013, so they will try to stay on top of the Mountain Hawks. Chase Edmonds is my player to watch this week. If the defense can't stop him, I think Fordham will win this game for sure. If Lehigh wins, they can clinch the Patriot League title with a win over Bucknell next week. Colgate hosts Holy Cross at home for Family Weekend at 1 p.m. The Raiders beat Holy Cross 31-14 in last year's meeting. Crusaders head coach Tom Gilmore says he will need to adjust the game plan in order to combat the strengths of Colgate's read option offense. Colgate senior quarterback Jake Melville is my player to watch this week. He's a dual threat, and I think he'll be able to pick apart the defense with his talent. Look at this to be a close game that comes down to the wire before a winner is decided. With the FCS Kickoff on Football Gameplan, I'm Chris Fichtel.
Welcome back to the FCS Kickoff. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Down south this week, there are a ton of great matchups, and we'll start with one of those as Eastern Illinois makes their way down to Alabama to face conference foe Jacksonville State. The Panthers do a great job of getting multiple options involved in the passing game, and they'll need that level of multiplicity against the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. Eastern Illinois also boasts one of the best backs in the subdivision in Devin Church, who is also the leading receiver on the team. And we know what the plan is offensively, feed Church, but defensively the task will be to make Eli Jenkins beat you throwing the football. Jacksonville State does a great job of spreading the field and beating you with their zone read. Defensively, they're coming off probably the best defensive performance of the season, getting 3 pick-6 touchdowns in a win over Eastern Kentucky. Their perimeter defense will be put to the test as they'll have to contain Church and hopefully make him a non-factor in this game. I think that's where the Gamecocks have the advantage in the trenches, and that's where they'll win up front on both sides, ultimately winning the game. Big battle in the SWAC as the East versus West meet up when Prairie View travels to Jackson State. The Panthers come into this ball game 4-3 on the season with only one loss to an FCS opponent, and that was to Grambling. Prairie View has a really good defensive line led by Devon Reed, and if they can build consistency with their passing game, they could really get things going here and get back on track with the back half of their season underway. Jackson State has found themselves with some recent success, winners of 3 of their last 4, and the biggest reason why has been their ability to run the football. Running backs Jordan Johnson and Joshua Bates have been a really good tandem, and have seen their fortunes take a turn for the better as their passing game became much more competent. So look for Jarrett Morikawa to continue to stabilize this offense, while Javancy Jones will continue to wreak havoc defensively. I think the Tigers' defense will be the reason why they knock off Prairie View. Another big matchup in the SWAC between Southern and Alcorn State. The Jags are one of the best teams in the conference, and they bring their high-powered offensive attack into Lorman, Mississippi. Running back Leonard Tillery is only 145 yards away from being the all-time leading rusher in SWAC history. In this game, you look to a Jaguars defense that must be able to win on first down versus the Braves' rushing attack. Alcorn State will try to come into this ball game and establish the line of scrimmage with their ground game, then try to take shots deep down the field off of play action. For Alcorn, they can definitely get after the quarterback, and I'm a big fan of Darian Anderson's ability to affect the game with how he plays on both ends of defense. The weird thing is that despite their ability to get pressure, the Braves have problems defending on the back end. I think that'll be their Achilles heel in this ball game, as well as Southern's quarterback Austin Howard and wide receiver Willie Quinn should connect on a few big plays downfield en route to a victory. In the Southland Conference, we have ourselves a dandy with Central Arkansas and Southeastern Louisiana. The Bears are coming into this ballgame red hot and undefeated in conference play with a 5-0 record. They've done so by dominating both sides of the line of scrimmage. They've checked multiple stylistic boxes as far as opponents are concerned, so they shouldn't be surprised with what they see or what the Lions bring to the table with their spread up-tempo offensive attack. The Lions defensively have the ability to make plays, especially within the back 7. I've been impressed with how outside linebacker Sion Tuhima has integrated himself within this defense and is having a big-time impact after transferring from LSU. Offensively, now that quarterback Deshae Lander is back in the fold and healthy, we should see a much more consistent brand of offense from the Lions. I think that's the biggest X factor in this ball game. Will the Lions be able to consistently move the football against the Bears' defensive front? I just don't foresee that being the case later on in the game when you need it the most. I like the Bears to win this one. This is a big week in the Pioneer League. This season, we have 2 squads in Marist and Stetson that are charging up the standings and ready to challenge the big dogs on the block. Marist is undefeated in the Pioneer League, and Stetson is at 2-2. Jacksonville has quietly had a really good season so far. The Dolphins were expected to take a big step back this year with all of the losses, but they are playing some good ball and find themselves at 2-1 in conference and 3-3 overall. And they're coming off a 61-49 victory over Morehead State. Looking at this week's schedule, I think everyone will be honed in on that San Diego Marist game as the Toreros make the trek out east to Poughkeepsie, New York to take on the Red Foxes. But Campbell and Drake, in my opinion, is another big one because the Camels are 1-2 in conference, 3-3 overall, and is looking to claw their way back up the rankings for a chance at posting back-to-back winning seasons. I think we're starting to see people around the FCS respect the strength of the SoCon this year. 3 teams, the Citadel, Chattanooga, and Sanford, all have one loss on the year. And as we already know, as we take a look at the SoCon standings, the Citadel is the only undefeated team in conference and is one of 2 undefeated teams in the entire FCS, as Sam Houston State is also 7-0 on the year. Both Furman and Western Carolina have had their struggles this season and are just building depth for next year by playing a lot of young guys and getting them some valuable reps that you can't replicate in practice. Now, looking at this week's schedule, Mercer and Wofford should be an entertaining game. Mercer still has an outside shot, in my opinion, at an at-large bid, and a win over the very tough Terriers could go a long way in strengthening their case. Wofford let one slip away last week in overtime against the Citadel. The Bulldogs themselves traveled to East Tennessee State this week in what could be a very tough game because the Bucks are no pushover and will be a game opponent. And VMI looks to get back on the winning track as they face the Furman Paladins. Each week, more and more FCS players emerge and make themselves known to the nation. In the process, they also make themselves known to pro scouts. So here's this week's edition of 5th Down Draft Outlook of players that you definitely want to keep an eye on. Crochet of the Citadel at 6'2", 253 pounds is a senior outside linebacker that is definitely one to keep an eye on this week and also the rest of the season. He's a big force in the running game, also shows the ability to collapse a pocket and good closing speed to the quarterback. I think he's better suited as a simple rush in, a guy that you don't want dropping back in coverage as often. He's more of a run defender. I could also see him playing an inside linebacker role in a 3-4 defense. I just think he's very strong versus the run, good closing speed to the quarterback, and shows the power that you want to see from a linebacker playing at the second level. And the Citadel has a big game this week, quite honestly, against East Tennessee State. They can't fall asleep and think the Bucks will be a cakewalk. So when you look at a guy like Joe Crochet and what he can do to make sure that doesn't happen, you're definitely going to be interested in watching how he's able to compete versus the running game of the Bucks. The Southland Conference is home to the nation's #1 team in the country in the Sam Houston State Bearcats. The undefeated Bearcats are 6-0 in conference, 7-0 overall, and have a very tough Central Arkansas Bears team breathing down their neck in conference. And the Bears are also undefeated in conference play and want to keep it that way until they meet up with the Bearcats later on in the season. In the middle of the conference, Lamar, Nichols, McNeese, and Stephen F. Austin State are all 3-4 to 4-4 overall and 2-3 to 3-2 in conference. Some of that should start to sort itself out this week as we peek over at the schedule. Lamar takes on Houston Baptist. Nichols takes on in-state rival Northwestern State, who are looking for their first conference win on the season. And Stephen F. Austin travels to San Antonio to take on Incarnate Word. Keep an eye on that Texas Southern Sam Houston State game. 2 great coaches in that one, as Mike Haywood of Texas Southern and Casey Keeler of Sam Houston State meet up down in Huntsville, Texas. And there should be a lot of points scored in that Abilene Christian McNeese State game as the Cowboys are trying to get over 500 on the season. We've talked about it all season long that the strength in the Southwestern Athletic Conference was in the West Division, and while that's still true, the East Division has made some big-time strides in the win column as we take a look at the SWAC standings. Alcorn State seems to have awakened and find themselves at 3-3 on the season, with 3-2 being in conference. They are also tied in conference with Jackson State, who are coming off of a win over Texas Southern. In the West Division, Grambling, Southern, and Prairie View A&M all have 4 conference wins. Both Grambling and Southern are the only ones that are undefeated in conference play. That makes this week's schedule pretty interesting and filled with a few big games like Southern and Alcorn State, Jackson State at Prairie View, and Texas Southern and Sam Houston State. Now, Grambling will try to avoid the letdown this week as they face Arkansas Pine Bluff and their outstanding quarterback, Brandon Duncan. As we reach the fourth quarter of our show this week, let's look out west and take a look at two games that stand out to me on the schedule. And we'll start in Grand Forks, North Dakota, where the Fighting Hawks host the Weber State Wildcats. What a matchup we have in the Big Sky this week. One of two marquee matchups, and in this ball game, Weber State is playing some phenomenal football this year. The Wildcats are spreading the ball around. They're playing opportunistic defense, and they have found themselves undefeated in conference play and riding a 5-game winning streak. They face one of the more well-balanced squads in the FCS in North Dakota. All of the pieces have come together for the Fighting Hawks this season. They've developed a multifaceted ground game and execute their timing-based passing offense to perfection. What will be the test in this ball game? One that ultimately comes down to third down defense and red zone defense. In my opinion, both are areas where North Dakota excels, and that's where they'll limit the Wildcats to 3s instead of 7s. I like the Fighting Hawks in this ball game. North Dakota slowly squeezes the life out of an offensive attack as they slowly start to pull away. And the other big battle in the Big Sky is between the Montana Grizzlies and Eastern Washington Eagles. Montana suffered a big setback last week against Northern Arizona. In this game versus Eastern Washington, they have to not get too enamored with their passing game. The Grizz, in my opinion, passed themselves into a loss last week, getting away from the run too quickly. There's a ton of talent across the board offensively for them to not get caught up in a one-dimensional approach. Now, for the Eagles in this ballgame, their biggest strength, which is the passing game, is actually Montana's biggest weakness, which is defending the pass. Also, their quarterback, Gage Gubrud, is a dual-threat athlete that can take advantage of a defense if they get over-aggressive in trying to apply pressure. But all that said, I do see a shootout on the horizon in this ballgame. Both teams can push the tempo. Both have some inconsistent defensive play, but only one has the best player in the subdivision, and that's Eastern Washington's Cooper Kupp. I like the Eagles. So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts